I was 24 and working a dead-end office job in Denver when Grandma called with news that would change my life. She'd fallen and broken her hip, and at 82, the recovery was going to be long and difficult. The ranch was too much for her to handle alone, and she needed help. "I know it's a lot to ask," she said during our phone conversation, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "But I don't know who else to turn to. Your cousins are all busy with their careers, and your parents think I should just sell the place and move to assisted living." The ranch had been in our family for 4 generations. Grandma and Grandpa had built it into a successful cattle operation on 800 acres of prime grazing land in eastern Colorado. After Grandpa died 10 years earlier, Grandma had managed to keep it running with hired help, but her age was catching up with her. I'd spent summers at the ranch as a kid, learning to ride horses, help with cattle, and fix fences. Those were some of my happiest memories, but I hadn't been back much since starting my career. The office job was stable but unfulfilling, and I'd been feeling restless for months. "I'll come help," I told her without hesitation. My parents thought I was making a mistake. "You can't just abandon your career to play cowboy," my mother said. "Grandma needs professional care, not a grandson who remembers a few summer vacations." But something about Grandma's situation called to me. Maybe it was guilt over not visiting more often, or maybe it was a desire to reconnect with something real and meaningful. Either way, I gave my 2 weeks' notice and drove to the ranch. When I arrived, I was shocked by how much Grandma had aged and how run down the property had become. Chapter 2. Learning the Reality. The ranch was in worse shape than I'd expected. Grandma had been struggling for months before her fall, trying to maintain the operation with minimal help. Fences needed repair, equipment was breaking down, and several of the cattle had health issues that required immediate attention. Grandma was still in the hospital when I arrived, so I had to figure out the daily routine on my own. The hired hand, Miguel, had been doing his best, but he was only part-time and couldn't handle everything alone. He was grateful for the help and patient with my questions as I relearned skills I'd forgotten since childhood. The first few weeks were overwhelming. I was used to sitting at a desk all day, not hauling feed, fixing water troughs, and checking on sick animals. My hands blistered, my back ached, and I fell into bed exhausted every night. But gradually, I began to remember why I'd loved the ranch as a kid. There was something deeply satisfying about the physical work and the direct connection between effort and results. When I fixed a fence, cattle stayed where they belonged. When I treated a sick calf, it got better. The work had immediate, tangible meaning, in a way my office job never had. When Grandma came home from the hospital, she was using a walker and moving slowly, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She watched me work with a mixture of gratitude and assessment, occasionally offering advice or correction. "You're getting the hang of it," she said one evening as we sat on the porch after a long day. "Your grandfather would be proud to see you taking care of the place." I'd planned to stay just until Grandma recovered, but as weeks turned into months, I realized I didn't want to leave. The ranch was becoming home in a way my apartment in Denver never had. Chapter 3. Family Reactions. My decision to stay at the ranch permanently didn't go over well with the rest of the family. My parents were disappointed that I'd thrown away my education and career prospects. My cousins thought I was crazy to isolate myself on a remote ranch instead of pursuing opportunities in the city. "It's not a real career," my cousin Sarah said during a rare phone call. "What are you going to do when Grandma doesn't need help anymore? You can't just be a ranch hand forever." But Grandma and I had been discussing the future, and she'd offered to teach me the business side of the operation. She wanted to gradually transfer more responsibility to me, with the goal of eventually making me a partner in the ranch. "I've been looking for someone who really understands this place," she told me one evening as we reviewed the books. "Your cousins see dollar signs when they look at the land, but you see what it really is, a way of life that's worth preserving." The ranch was profitable, though not extravagantly so. It generated enough income to support a comfortable lifestyle and had significant assets in land and livestock. More importantly, it was debt-free and had been well managed for decades. My extended family's attitude toward my decision became clearer during holiday visits. Relatives who had rarely shown interest in the ranch suddenly had opinions about its management and future. They'd make comments about maximizing the property's potential or suggest that Grandma should consider retirement options. I began to understand that many of them saw the ranch as a future inheritance rather than a working operation. They were polite to me, but I could sense their concern that my presence might complicate their expectations. Grandma noticed these dynamics too. "Vultures," she said quietly, after one particularly awkward family dinner. "They circle around, waiting for something to happen." Chapter 4. Building the operation. Over the next 2 years, Grandma and I worked together to modernize and improve the ranch operation. She taught me everything she knew about cattle breeding, pasture management, and the business aspects of ranching. I brought some fresh ideas about technology and marketing that helped increase profitability. We installed new water systems, improved the handling facilities, and upgraded some of the equipment. I also started a small direct sales program, selling beef directly to local restaurants and farmers markets. The additional revenue stream helped offset some of the costs of modernization. Grandma was an excellent teacher, patient with my mistakes, but demanding about standards. She'd grown up on the ranch and had learned from her father and grandfather, so she carried decades of accumulated wisdom about everything from weather patterns to cattle behavior. "Ranching isn't just about the animals," she'd tell me as we worked together. "It's about understanding the land, the seasons, and how everything connects. You can't rush it or force it. You have to work with nature, not against it." I was also learning about the financial side of the operation. Grandma showed me how to read market reports, plan for seasonal cash flow variations, and make strategic decisions about breeding and selling. The ranch was more complex than I'd realized, requiring skills in animal husbandry, agriculture, mechanics, and business management. My relationship with Grandma deepened during this time. We spent hours together every day, working side by side and talking about everything from ranch history to life philosophy. She shared stories about my grandfather and the early days of their marriage, when they'd struggled to build the operation from almost nothing. "We never had much money in those days," she said, "but we had each other, and we had purpose. That's worth more than most people realize." Chapter 5. Health decline. Grandma's health began declining noticeably in her 3rd year after the hip surgery. She was 85 and still mentally sharp, but her physical strength was fading. She needed help with more daily activities and couldn't participate in the heavier ranch work anymore. I hired additional help to handle some of the physical labor, but I made sure to include Grandma in all the major decisions. She still knew more about the operation than anyone else, and her judgment was invaluable when dealing with complex situations. During this time, family visits became more frequent. Relatives who had barely acknowledged the ranch's existence suddenly showed interest in Grandma's health and living situation. They'd arrive with suggestions about medical care, living arrangements, and planning for the future. My Aunt Patricia was particularly persistent about getting Grandma to organize her affairs. She'd bring up topics like power of attorney, estate planning, and the burden I was carrying by managing the ranch alone. "You shouldn't have to sacrifice your life taking care of Mother," Patricia would say, though she'd never offered to help herself. "There are professionals who can handle this kind of situation." Grandma would listen politely, but never commit to anything. After these visits, she'd often seem tired and stressed, as if the conversations drained her energy. "They mean well," she'd tell me, "but they don't understand what this place means to me. They see problems that need solving, but I see a life that's worth living." I could see that the family pressure was affecting her, but I didn't know how to address it without creating more conflict. Grandma had always been independent and strong-willed, and I didn't want to interfere with her family relationships. But I was also protective of her and frustrated by relatives who showed up with opinions but no willingness to actually help. Chapter 6. The final months. Grandma's final months were both precious and difficult. Her body was failing, but her mind remained clear, and she used the time to share more stories and wisdom about the ranch and our family history. She also became more direct about her concerns regarding the family's expectations. "They think I don't know what they're thinking," she said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "But I've been watching people for 85 years. I know who shows up when times are tough and who only appears when there might be something to gain." During this period, she insisted on updating her will and other legal documents. She worked with a lawyer from town, someone she'd known for years who understood the ranch and its importance to her. "I want to make sure everything is clear," she told me. "No confusion, no arguments, no surprises. This place needs to go to someone who will take care of it properly." I assumed she was referring to general estate planning, but I didn't ask for details. It felt inappropriate to discuss inheritance while she was still alive and making her own decisions. The ranch continued operating smoothly despite Grandma's declining health. I'd learned enough to handle most situations independently, though I still consulted with her on major decisions. Miguel had become a trusted full-time employee, and we'd hired a part-time veterinary assistant to help with animal health issues. Financially, the operation was in the best shape it had been in years. The direct sales program was successful, cattle prices were strong, and we'd built up a solid cash reserve for emergencies. Grandma seemed satisfied with how things were going. "You've done good work here," she told me. "Better than I could have hoped for when I first asked for your help." Chapter 7. The passing grandma died peacefully in her sleep on a Tuesday morning in early October. I found her when I brought her morning coffee, something that had become our daily ritual. She looked peaceful, as if she'd simply decided it was time to go. The grief hit me harder than I'd expected. Despite knowing her health was declining, I wasn't prepared for the finality of her absence. The ranch felt empty without her presence, even though the daily work continued as usual. I called the family to inform them of her passing, and within hours, relatives began arriving from across the country. Some came to help with funeral arrangements, but others seemed more interested in assessing the property and discussing practical matters. The funeral home handled most of the arrangements, following instructions Grandma had left with her lawyer. She'd planned everything in advance, including the service details and burial arrangements. Even in death, she was organized and thoughtful. During the days between her death and the funeral, I found myself in an awkward position. I was grieving the loss of someone who had become like a second mother to me, but I was also dealing with family members who seemed more focused on logistics than mourning. My cousin Michael arrived with a briefcase full of documents and immediately began asking questions about the ranch's financial status, property values, and operational details. My Aunt Patricia started going through Grandma's personal belongings, claiming she was helping organize things. I tried to be accommodating while protecting Grandma's privacy and maintaining the ranch operations. The cattle still needed care, and the daily work couldn't stop just because we were dealing with a family crisis. But I could feel the tension building as relatives positioned themselves for whatever would come next. Chapter 8. The Funeral. The funeral was held at the small church in town where Grandma had been a member for 60 years. The service was well attended, with neighbors, fellow ranchers, and community members sharing memories of her generosity and strength. I gave a eulogy about her dedication to the land and her family, trying to capture the essence of who she'd been and what she'd meant to our community. Several neighbors spoke about her kindness and the help she'd provided during difficult times. But even during the service, I could sense the undercurrent of family tension. Relatives who had barely spoken to each other in years were huddled together, having whispered conversations about the situation and what happens next. After the burial, the family gathered at the ranch house for a meal that neighbors had prepared. It should have been a time for sharing memories and supporting each other, but instead, it felt like a business meeting disguised as a wake. My cousin Sarah was the first to bring up the subject directly. "So, what's the plan for the ranch?" she asked during a lull in conversation. "I assume there will be a will reading soon." Other relatives nodded in agreement, and suddenly all eyes were on me. They seemed to expect that I would have information about Grandma's estate plans, but I honestly didn't know the details. "Her lawyer will handle all that," I said, trying to deflect the conversation. "I'm sure he'll contact everyone when it's appropriate." But the questions kept coming. How much was the property worth? What were the operational costs? Was the ranch profitable? Did Grandma have other assets? The interrogation felt disrespectful so soon after her burial. Finally, my Uncle Robert asked the question that everyone was thinking. Did she ever mention what she planned to do with the place? Chapter 9. The Will Reading. The will reading was scheduled for the following week at the lawyer's office in town. Attorney James Morrison had handled Grandma's legal affairs for over 20 years and knew the family dynamics well. The entire extended family gathered in his conference room. My parents, my 3 aunts and uncles, and my 5 cousins. I was nervous about what we'd learn, but I was also curious about Grandma's final wishes. Mr. Morrison began by reading the standard legal language, then moved to the specific bequests. Grandma had left personal items and modest cash gifts to various family members, ensuring that everyone received something meaningful. Then he reached the section about the ranch. The room fell silent as he read, "To my grandson, who has dedicated the last 3 years of his life to caring for me and preserving our family's legacy. I leave the ranch property, all livestock, equipment, and related assets, along with the responsibility to continue the operation that has been our family's foundation for 4 generations." The silence that followed was deafening. I was stunned. I'd hoped for some recognition, but I hadn't expected to inherit the entire operation. The ranch was worth well over $1 million, making it by far the largest asset in Grandma's estate. My cousin Michael was the first to speak. There must be some mistake. Grandma wouldn't leave everything to just one person. But Mr. Morrison continued reading, explaining that Grandma had included a detailed letter explaining her decision. She'd written about my dedication to the ranch, my understanding of the operation, and her confidence that I would preserve the family legacy. The letter also addressed the family's concern. I know some of you may feel this decision is unfair, but I've watched who showed up when I needed help and who only appeared when there might be something to gain. The ranch needs someone who loves it, not someone who sees it as a financial opportunity. The room erupted in shocked conversations and heated protests. Chapter 10. Family Reactions. The aftermath of the will reading was explosive. Several family members immediately questioned the validity of the will, suggesting that Grandma had been influenced or wasn't mentally competent when she made her decision. My Aunt Patricia was particularly vocal. "This is ridiculous. He's just a kid who's been playing cowboy for a few years. He doesn't have the experience or resources to run a major operation like this." My cousin Sarah accused me of manipulating Grandma during her final years. "You isolated her from the family and convinced her to leave everything to you. This isn't what she would have wanted if she'd been thinking clearly." The accusations hurt, but they also revealed the family's true attitudes. They weren't questioning Grandma's mental capacity out of concern for her. They were angry that their inheritance expectations hadn't been met. Mr. Morrison defended the will's validity, explaining that Grandma had been thoroughly evaluated by her doctor before making the changes, and that her mental competency was well documented. He also revealed that she'd updated the will multiple times over the past 2 years, each time reaffirming her decision. "Your grandmother was very clear about her reasoning," he told the family. "She spent considerable time thinking about this decision and discussing it with me. She wanted the ranch to go to someone who would preserve it as a working operation, not sell it for development." Some family members threatened legal action, but Mr. Morrison explained that contesting the will would be expensive and unlikely to succeed given the documentation of Grandma's mental competency and clear reasoning. My parents were conflicted. They were proud that Grandma had recognized my dedication, but they were also concerned about the family rift this would create. "Maybe you could work out some kind of arrangement with your cousins," my mother suggested. "Share the inheritance somehow." But I remembered Grandma's words about vultures circling, and I realized that any compromise would likely lead to pressure to sell the ranch, which was exactly what she'd wanted to avoid. Chapter 11. Standing My Ground. The pressure from family members continued for weeks after the will reading. They alternated between accusations, guilt trips, and attempts at negotiation. Some offered to help me manage the ranch in exchange for partial ownership. Others suggested I should sell the property and divide the proceeds among the family. My cousin Michael, with his business background, was particularly persistent. He presented detailed financial projections showing how much money I could make by selling the ranch for development. "You could be set for life," he argued. "Why tie yourself down to this remote place when you could have real financial freedom?" But I'd learned enough about ranching to understand what Grandma had been protecting. The land wasn't just valuable as real estate. It was productive agricultural property that had sustained our family for generations. Selling it would end that legacy forever. I also realized that my 3 years on the ranch had changed me fundamentally. I wasn't the same person who had worked in a Denver office, feeling unfulfilled and restless. The ranch had given me purpose, skills, and a deep connection to something larger than myself. Mr. Morrison helped me understand the legal aspects of my inheritance and the responsibilities that came with it. The ranch came with some debt, but it was manageable and the operation was profitable. I also inherited Grandma's other assets, including savings and investments that provided additional financial security. More importantly, I inherited the relationships Grandma had built with neighbors, suppliers, and customers. The ranching community was supportive and welcoming, offering advice and assistance as I transitioned into full ownership. Miguel was thrilled that the ranch would continue operating. "Miss Elena, she knew what she was doing," he told me. "You understand this place. You care about it the right way." The validation from people who actually knew the ranch and understood its value meant more to me than my family's criticism. Chapter 12. Moving Forward. 6 months after Grandma's death, I had settled into my role as the ranch owner. The operation was running smoothly, and I'd implemented several improvements that increased both efficiency and profitability. I expanded the direct sales program, developed relationships with additional restaurants and farmers markets, and started offering ranch tours for urban families interested in learning about agriculture. These initiatives generated additional revenue while sharing Grandma's passion for educating people about farming. The family relationships remained strained, though some relatives had begun to accept the situation. My parents visited occasionally and seemed proud of what I'd accomplished, even if they still worried about my long-term prospects. My cousin Jennifer, who had always been more interested in the ranch's history than its financial value, became an ally. She helped me organize Grandma's papers and photographs, creating a family archive that documented the ranch's development over 4 generations. "Grandma was right about you," Jennifer told me during one of her visits. "You're the only one who really understood what this place meant to her." The legal challenges never materialized. After consulting with attorneys, the family realized that contesting the will would be expensive and unlikely to succeed. Some relatives remained bitter, but others gradually accepted that Grandma had made her choice for good reasons. I also discovered that Grandma had been more strategic than I'd realized. She'd structured the inheritance to minimize tax implications and had left detailed instructions for maintaining the ranch's agricultural exemptions and conservation programs. Her planning extended beyond finances to operational detail. She'd left notes about seasonal routines, supplier relationships, and long-term land management strategies. Even in death, she was still teaching me how to be a successful rancher. Chapter 13. Legacy Preserved. 3 years after inheriting the ranch, I can honestly say it was the best decision Grandma could have made. The operation has thrived under my management, and I've expanded it in ways that honor her vision while adapting to modern opportunities. The ranch now employs 4 full-time workers and generates revenue through multiple streams: cattle sales, direct meat sales, agritourism, and consulting services for other ranchers. We've also implemented sustainable practices that improve both profitability and environmental stewardship. I've married a wonderful woman who shares my passion for ranch life, and we're expecting our first child. The 5th generation of our family will grow up on the same land where I learned to ride horses and fix fences, continuing a legacy that Grandma fought to preserve. The family relationships have mostly healed, though some relatives remain distant. Those who visit are usually impressed by what I've accomplished and seem to understand why Grandma made her choice. My cousin Michael, who was initially the most critical, recently asked for advice about buying rural property for his own family. "I didn't understand it at the time," he admitted, "but I think Grandma knew what she was doing. You've built something special here." The ranch has also become a gathering place for the family members who appreciate its history and significance. We host reunions and celebrations that help maintain connections while respecting the working nature of the operation. Most importantly, I wake up every morning doing work that I love, on land that I'm committed to preserving for future generations. Grandma's gift wasn't just property. It was the opportunity to live a meaningful life, connected to the land and our family's heritage. The relatives who questioned her decision at the funeral have seen the results of her wisdom. The ranch is more successful than ever, the family legacy is secure, and the land remains productive agricultural property rather than another subdivision. Thank you for listening to my story. It's a reminder that sometimes the people who show up when you need them most are the ones who deserve to be remembered in return. Taking care of someone you love isn't just about duty, it's about building relationships that can transform your life in unexpected ways. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and whether you've had experiences with family members who stepped up during difficult times. Please share in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about family, legacy, and the unexpected rewards of loyalty.